Capcom is infamously known as the company that revolutionized zombie games, creating the biggest horror franchise of all time with Resident Evil, which over decades has grown bigger and bigger and thrown itself into multiple different directions. But whilst Resident Evil eclipses most of their other franchises in terms of sales, fanbase, and industry impact, there is another Capcom zombie game that turned out pretty successful. It was Capcom's first step into the next generation with the Xbox 360, using the technology to design a game that nobody had played before. Dead Rising. Dead Rising's development is very interesting. During the 2000s, Capcom was looking for ways to make games appeal more to the Western market. One of their attempts at this was Shadow of Rome, a game with a fictionalized take on the assassination of Julius Caesar that got decent critical acclaim and a cult following, but ultimately underperformed in terms of sales. Initially, Dead Rising was actually going to be a sequel to this game very early in development, but the idea was ultimately dropped. After workshopping some ideas around, the team eventually came up with the idea of making a game that was a big homage to zombie films of the 1970s, in particular George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Initially, the higher-ups at Capcom refused the idea because 1. They already had a zombie franchise, and 2. This was during a period where Capcom was not doing well financially after making some stupid business decisions, which they would continue to make for at least another decade. So they were very hesitant to dabble with new IPs. Lost Planet is another good example of this. In both cases, Keiji Inafune, who was the producer on both games, really fought to get both of them made, even getting the teams of both to put playable demos together to show the higher-ups, and eventually they were convinced and the game got greenlit. Dead Rising was announced at E3 2005 and was initially going to be an Xbox 360 launch title in November 2005. However, Capcom knew the game would need more time, so the game ended up releasing 9 months later in August 2006. The game went through multiple story and design changes. Frank was initially more ugly, which was actually intentional, and certain character or story events were changed in the final game, and the overall look of the game was overhauled to be more colorful and saturated. I suggest looking into it because it's very interesting, but that's not what this video is primarily about. The game ended up selling well, especially for an early Xbox 360 game, with 1.8 million units sold, and it received universal critical acclaim by critics, many of which called it the first true next-gen game. I myself am a big fan of Dead Rising 1. It's my favorite entry in the franchise, and one of my favorite Capcom games, and being that I can't seem to stop covering Capcom games for whatever reason, I thought I would take a look back on this one. Dead Rising has very arcade-inspired game design. The basic premise is that you're trapped in a mall with zombies for 72 hours and have cases to solve, survivors to save, and photographs to capture. The 72-hour time limit is what makes the game interesting. The game starts at 12 PM on the 19th of September 2006 and ends at 12 PM on the 22nd of September. It's not an actual 72 hours. Time in-game moves forward 12 times faster than in real time, so one day in the game is 2 hours in real time, for example, meaning that you have 6 hours to cover the incident in the mall before the helicopter arrives to pick you up. And if you're not at the helipad at 12 PM on the 22nd, you get left behind. Having a time limit to complete the game goes back to a lot of games from the 80s and 90s, especially during the arcade era, where you have a time limit to complete each level and game overall. The game does have main missions known as cases. Cases will only start at specific times during the 72 hours at the mall, and if you fail to start them or finish them within the time limit, then the truth behind the outbreak is lost. You can also fail them just by messing up the case, such as killing a crucial character, for example. There are side missions involving survivors and psychopaths as well. Survivors can be found around the mall, and you can escort them back to the safe room, and there is a big incentive to do so as survivors are the biggest resource of prestige points, or PP, needed to level up. The more you carry with you at any given time grants higher levels of PP, but it's also riskier to do since you have to manage different survivors with different attributes at once. Psychopaths are boss fights involving someone gone mad due to the outbreak, or someone using the outbreak as a way to commit heinous acts. Oftentimes they'll be holding survivors hostage too. So what makes Dead Rising interesting is that everything in this game is on a time limit. Anytime a new survivor pops up, you have a limited time to go get them, or they die. If a psychopath shows up causing terror, you have a limited time to find them and defeat them, or the scoop is lost. What this means is that in addition to managing your resources and inventory, you also have to manage your time as well. Thankfully, for the main missions, the game is upfront and tells you exactly when they're going to start, but for the side content, you won't know until either Otis the janitor calls you, or you find them yourself. The game will often notify you of scoops, but it doesn't notify you of every scoop. Some you will just have to find by yourself. This works really well with the interconnected mall that has different shortcuts and pathways to areas, because since the clock is ticking every second, you actually have to plan out your approach. In a game like Resident Evil, this is already helpful to do to manage resources, but you don't have a time limit in that game, so you can take it easy and stroll through areas in the most comfortable way possible. In Dead Rising, taking a safer route could take longer and you'll run out of time. I have a good example of this right here. I have 3 survivors with me, and I have a shortcut back to the safe room. There is a 4th survivor in the next section of the mall, which is not far away, but there are a bunch of zombies between here and there. Whilst I could leave these 3 here, a survivor's health bar slowly depletes when left behind, so I would have a limited window to get back before all 3 of them die. I could bring them with me, but that risks them getting killed, and then I would not get as much PP. And even if they didn't get killed, it might take time to get them back safely, and I have another case coming up soon that I plan on doing. I could just take these 3 back to the safe room and then go get the other guy, but that would give me less PP than bringing back all 4 of them together. So my options are to risk getting no PP for a lot of PP, or no risk of losing PP but I get less. There's a lot of PP in this game. You'll have to make decisions like this quite often, based on where you are, where you need to be, and how long it will take to get their incomplete objectives. Thankfully though, the game isn't like this all the time. The cases are spread out enough time-wise that you can take a breather or focus on completing other activities, but it's always something you'll have to keep in the back of your mind when traveling through the mall. Day 2 is the most hectic with multiple cases back to back and many survivors and psychopaths to face. Day 3 calms down a bit. What is awesome about this game though is that everything is optional, even the cases. You see, if you fail the cases and the truth vanishes into darkness, the game gives you an option to keep on playing until the helicopter arrives anyway. So you won't be able to complete the main story, but you will be able to get either ending B or E. And this adds a lot of replayability to the game and different options every time you play. If you're not interested in completing the main story, then you can just let the timer expire and keep on playing. And while survivors are useful for PP, you don't actually need to save anyone to beat the game or even get the true ending. But a really unique feature about Dead Rising is how the New Game Plus experience is entirely built into the game's structure. If you die or fail a case, you are given the option of saving your status and quitting. What this does is reset your progress to the beginning of the game, but your stats carry over into your new playthrough. So let's say you're having a difficult time with the game, or you didn't get the ending you wanted, or a scoop that you wanted to complete ran out of time. You can restart your playthrough at whatever level you are now and have a better chance of not only surviving, but finishing whatever tasks you want to do. This also gives the player some leniency with how they spend their time in the game, since if they make a mistake, they can try again with better chances. This makes the game more fun on replays, since bosses that used to kick your butt will now struggle to put up a challenge, and you can get through sections much faster, thus leaving more time for you to complete other stuff. And the developers were aware that most players wouldn't see everything in the game on their first playthrough, which is why they designed the game with this system in mind, to encourage replay value, something Capcom is very well known for. I've seen people complain about the time limit in not only this game but Dead Rising 2 as well. The complaint is mainly that the timer puts too much pressure on the player to complete objectives and doesn't allow them to play the game the way they want. The problem with this complaint is that first of all, we've established that everything in this game is optional. If you just want to run around killing zombies in funny ways, you absolutely can. The game isn't forcing you to play a specific way, and there's multiple approaches you can take, which are all valid. In fact, the entire reason the developers went with a journalist as the protagonist was to allow multiple playstyles. Second, if you removed the timer from the game, there would be no pressure of failure, and the game would lose a lot of its structure. Dead Rising would then just be a linear series of tasks and missions you complete until you reach the end. Which, funny enough, that's pretty much what the Wii version is. It would also remove replayability from the game, since there would be no reason to have different endings, because the endings in the game are based on where you are or what you're doing when the timer runs out, and therefore it would narrow down playstyles and restrict player freedom during gameplay, since there would be no reason for the player to be doing anything apart from what the game tells them to do. It would pretty much mean that the only way to fail at Dead Rising would be to die and reload a save, which would not only make the game less unique, but it would also remove a lot of decision making from the game. At that point, why wouldn't I go out of my way to escort survivors and take the safest path possible? I have the time to kill. I don't think many people who complain about the timer in these games realize how boring Dead Rising would become if you removed the timer. Yes, the mechanics would be intact, but without any sort of structure, the game would fall apart. The only complaint I really have with the timer is the lack of an ability to advance time. This sort of is when the military arrive at the end of the game, since you can get kidnapped and break free, and you can use this as an opportunity to advance time faster, saving you real time. But if you're doing playthroughs where you're not completing all of the cases, then the special forces don't arrive, and then there's really not much for the player to do in the last hour of the game, besides wait, kill zombies, and level up. During the rest of the game, these wait periods are fine, because as I said, they give a bit of a breather before the pressure comes back, but in the last hour of the game, there's no survivors or psychopaths to go find, so it's pretty much just a waiting game until it's over, and it would have been nice to skip it. Aside from that though, Dead Rising has a really unique structure that brings the pressure and intensity of an arcade game into an open world structure, with main and side missions for the player to complete, whilst allowing for a lot of player freedom and expression, as well as replayability. The Willamette Mall is a pretty densely packed mall. Very little of this space is wasted unless it makes sense to. Every section of the mall has its own unique aesthetic, layout, and shops with different items. In pretty much every shop, you'll find either a weapon, food, clothing, or books. There's also some items scattered around areas of the mall, such as a katana near the cafe in Paradise Plaza, or the numerous SMGs hidden around the mall, which respawn as well. It encourages the player to explore to find items, as well as memorize the layout of the mall, since some items only spawn in specific areas. The mall itself is basically one big circle with a park in the middle that allows you to travel directly between 3 different zones as well as the underground tunnels, which also makes it fairly easy to remember the layout. Throughout the mall, you can find doors leading to the maintenance tunnels, but they're locked. However, if you enter via the entrance at the back, you can go down and find a key, allowing you to open any of the doors, which gives the player more options for moving around the mall. There's also a shortcut you can unlock in the toilet in Wonderland Plaza, which teleports you to the Paradise Plaza's toilet area, which is near the safe room, and it makes escorting survivors and traveling from one end of the map to the other very convenient. So the world is interconnected, but what I like is that whatever path you take has advantages and disadvantages. Very rarely is there a clear right way to get somewhere, especially when the convicts occupy the park. I know I'm jumping a bit forward by talking about one of the psychopaths, but this is important for the level design. So the convicts arrive at around 6 PM on the 19th, and they drive around in a vehicle while shooting a heavy machine gun and whacking zombies, survivors, and you with a baseball bat. It's very difficult to outrun them, and they can kill you and other survivors very easily, especially early in the game when you're at a low level. You can kill them and they disappear for a while, but they respawn at midnight every night until Case 8. This creates some interesting challenges for the player. For example, let's say I'm in Paradise Plaza and there's survivors in North Plaza I need to rescue. I could go through Leisure Park, which would take me directly to it, but I risk running into the convicts on the way there and the way back. I could use the shortcut to transport me to Wonderland Plaza, which avoids running into the convicts altogether, but what if the survivors are on the east end of North Plaza? I would then need to transport them all the way through North Plaza and part of Wonderland Plaza to get to the shortcut to take me to Paradise Plaza to get them to the safe room. And this process could take longer, especially if they keep getting grabbed by zombies, or flat out die. Whereas the previous method would take me straight to the survivors and then straight back to Paradise Plaza with fewer zombies to deal with. I could travel through the maintenance tunnels to avoid the convicts, which is viable when it's just you, but having to deal with hundreds of zombies whilst transporting survivors and running around, and with few resources to use, is tricky. And this is hypothetically if I only need to go to North Plaza. Let's say there's more survivors in areas such as Wonderland Plaza, Alfresca Plaza, or Entrance Plaza, and most of the time during the game there will be multiple survivors in multiple areas. You could do them individually to make it easier, but the rewards are so much lesser. If you want to get a lot of PP, you'll be wanting to transport as many survivors as you can at once back to the safe room. This is what makes the timer work so well also. If there was just one perfect way to get through areas or escort survivors, then the timer wouldn't be worth much. But the game gives you multiple options with varying degrees of success depending on your strategy. Thankfully, the game does give you some PP just for bringing the survivor into your group, so even if they do end up dying, you at least got something out of it and it wasn't a complete waste. Speaking of PP, there's multiple ways to gain it. You get some from killing a high number of zombies. Every 100 kill gives you 500 PP, every 1000th kill gives you 20,000 PP. Specific kills also grant extra PP. One of the more famous examples is photographs. How much PP you get depends on what's going on in the photo. If it's just a shot of some zombies, you'll only get a couple hundred, but if it's something special, you can get thousands or tens of thousands. Photos will fall into one of 5 genres depending on what gives the most points: brutality, drama, erotica, horror, and outtake. The game will often flash this camera icon during an opportunity to take a big PP image. But there is a book that tells you in real time what the current genre an NPC falls into. Sometimes when rescuing an NPC, a photo op will come up. Other times it will happen during a boss fight. The camera has a limit of 30 photos, but you can recharge it at camera shops. It also takes longer to recharge between shots if you try to spam it, so you're more encouraged to wait for the perfect photo opportunity. The camera mechanic is completely optional, but it does grant massive benefits, and it adds to Frank as a character, as he is exploiting the situation to get as much material possible for his story. Another way to gain PP is to defeat psychopaths, tough as they may be. There's some minor ways by interacting with some objects in the mall, like treadmills, riding the Space Rider, cooking stuff, or just messing around with objects in shops. The world is very interactable and the game rewards you for just fiddling around with stuff. Leveling up grants a few bonuses. Your attack power gets increased, your speed gets increased, your health bar increases, you can throw items farther, and your inventory size gets bigger. You also get wrestling moves, which make you formidable in combat even without a weapon. The progression in this game is very satisfying, as you go from jogging around like a goblin with barely any health, just using whatever weapons you can find to survive, to being an absolute beast who can suplex, roundhouse kick, and disembowel zombies with nothing, all the meanwhile easily avoiding them and carrying way too much stuff. Early on, managing space for weapons, health items, and buffs can be tough due to the small item stock, but later on you can go crazy. Dead Rising at level 50 is a completely different game from Dead Rising at level 1, and it just makes replaying it so much more fun, as there's stuff you can do on a second or third playthrough that you couldn't do before. A complaint I have though, although it doesn't really apply to the game anymore, is the save file. On the original Xbox 360 version of the game, you only had one save file. So if I wanted to restart the game from level 1, or if I had a roommate or something, I had to either start over on my save or copy my save file on my console. Thankfully, in the 2016 re-release, they added 5 save slots to fix this issue. The 2016 re-release is pretty good overall. It has some minor graphical bugs, but it's a very good way of experiencing the game. Now, a complaint I've heard from many people is that the only reason Dead Rising allows you to start over with your existing stats is because the game is poorly balanced, and the developers are allowing you to do this to make up for that. However, this doesn't hold any water. To test this, I did 2 playthroughs up to the facts, the last case, and in one of them, I didn't save any survivors, the biggest resource of PP in the game, but I did other stuff such as kill zombies, psychopaths, and other menial tasks. And then I did another playthrough where I only did the cases. I didn't do anything else. For the no survivors one, I was level 20 when finishing the facts. For the cases only one, I was level 10 when finishing case 8. The facts is just a cutscene, so I would still be level 10 during this run. By comparison, I was level 37 on my normal run at the end of the facts, and despite being low level, I managed to complete every case in the game. I even managed to complete the optional boss fight in case 7-2 with very little issue. This came down to just using good weapons and buffs when I needed them. If I'm at a low level and having a hard time, there's tools I can use to help me out. So beating this game at a low level is absolutely viable. And no, Dead Rising is not poorly balanced, and the New Game Plus features are not there as a crutch. You could argue that I'm experienced at the game and I know what I'm doing, but even still, I did these playthroughs to represent extreme situations where I'm at a disadvantage. The average player's mileage may vary. Either way, Dead Rising's level design allows for multiple options whilst reinforcing the time management of the game, and the game starts you off weak to make it satisfying to climb the ranks and become a one-man army killing machine. So we've established that Dead Rising's structure, level design, and progression are all pretty solid, but the game is also a zombie-killing sandbox. How does it manage with that? Pretty well. Almost every item in the mall can be picked up and used as a weapon to varying degrees of effectiveness. Some are just there to be funny, such as the golf club, the boomerang, football, and the CD cases you can throw. Others are actually quite useful, such as the bowling ball, sledgehammer, sickle, or lawnmower. There's a great variety of weapons to use, and the game doesn't care if it's a piece of junk and useless. You can still pick it up and attack enemies with it if you want. A lot of fun can be had just running around the mall, picking up things and testing them on zombies. Like throwing ketchup on zombies actually stains them. You can pick up masks and place them on zombies, which is pretty funny. You can use a giant lipstick and basically kiss zombies with it. You can heat up a frying pan and burn a zombie's face off, and more. And the cool thing is that not every item has to be good at killing to be useful. A parasol doesn't do much damage to zombies, but it clears the way pretty well. A skateboard breaks easily and does little damage, but it's the fastest way to get around without using a vehicle. And it's especially helpful early game, where Frank is slower than my old PC trying to run Doom 3. This toy laser sword basically does 0 damage and just knocks enemies down, but during nighttime sections, it acts as a torch lighting up the area with a pink light, making it easier to see. You can also find books around the mall which have interesting effects. Having a book in your inventory will either increase a stat or give you an ability you previously didn't have. So a health book, for example, will increase your healing by 50%. And you can find 3 of these types of books with increased effects, which stack. If you have all 3 books equipped, then a lot of food can heal your entire health bar with one use. And these can be accessed from the second the game starts. You can find books to increase the amount of PP gained from killing zombies, you can get books to increase the amount of PP from taking photos, make your bare-handed attacks deal more damage, books which allow you to do tricks whilst using a bicycle or skateboard, which not only increases their durability, but makes them more useful for traversal. And you can find books which increase the durability of specific items, such as toys, interior design items, or sharp objects by 3 times, making them more viable weapons. Every weapon in this game breaks after a certain usage, so given the option to make them last longer is awesome. An example is the katana. By default it breaks after 20 hits, but with the criminal biography book, it makes bladed weapons last 3 times as long, and it then breaks after 60. The best part is that you can stack multiple books with some weapons. A well-documented example is the hedge trimmer. By default, it can only be used 20 times before breaking, making it undesirable. But it has 3 books which increase its durability by 3 times. The criminal biography book, the engineering book, and the lifestyle magazine book. One of these will make it last 60, adding another will make it last 180, and then the cherry on top, the third one, will make it last 540 hits before breaking. And this makes a weapon that you would otherwise never pick up or use due to its durability a zombie slaughtering weapon. In fact, some weapons that may be useless early in the game can become very useful later on. Early in the game, knives break easily after 30 hits, and it takes at least 2 hits to kill a zombie. But after leveling up your attack, it will kill zombies in 1 hit, and if you use a book to triple it to 90 hits before breaking, you can clear out entire zombie crowds easily, and it's a weapon that's really easy to find and obtain. Also, any weapons used by psychopaths can be obtained after their fight, and they respawn after breaking, which adds more to the arcadey nature of the game. Plus, most weapons that can be stored in your inventory can be given to survivors, so if you have a really overpowered weapon, giving it to them increases their chances of survival. The survivors have gotten flack for having really bad AI, and yeah, they certainly do. I have many clips of them getting stuck on areas or their pathfinding being broken, or having a chainsaw and being unable to take on zombies. The AI can be frustrating to deal with, especially in groups, and the game does a poor job explaining how they work. So I'll do that right now. The way most survivors work is that their waypoint is you. You're their destination and they follow you wherever they go. There is a command to give them a specific waypoint, but otherwise, you're the goal. Now if you get grabbed by a zombie, their waypoint gets interrupted and they no longer have a goal as their waypoint is deemed in danger. As a result, they just stop dead in their tracks. Now some survivors are actually paired together, and as such their waypoint works a little differently. So right here we have Ross and Tanya. Now I'm still Ross's waypoint, but I'm actually not Tanya's waypoint. Tanya's waypoint is Ross. You can see this if I give it the command to move. she will only move to that area when Ross moves. So basically, she will completely ignore everything I do or tell her unless Ross does it, and if he gets attacked, her waypoint is blocked. Luckily, some survivors like Ross can be carried, or you can hold their hands, which makes both you and them harder to grab, but you do give up defense. Survivors also have an aggressive to coward spectrum that ranges how good they are in combat. So for example, some survivors such as Yu Tanaka or Kindell Johnson are very aggressive and will fight whatever comes their way without hesitation, and they are pretty effective, especially with good weapons. But then some such as Rich Atkins are cowards who, when Frank is enough distance away, will cower in fear and refuse to fight. They will turn aggressive when Frank is nearby, but otherwise they are helpless. So basically, when escorting survivors, you need to gauge who is good in a fight and who to give weapons to, who is paired up, and you also need to avoid getting grabbed as much as possible. The pathfinding can still be irritating to deal with at times, but once you understand how the AI works, it becomes more manageable. It's still pretty bad, and I don't know why this wasn't tutorialized, since the game gives prompts for most things and how they work. It comes across as sloppy and rushed. Which it kind of is. The idea of saving survivors came late in Dead Rising's development cycle and went through many iterations. It was originally meant to be way more ambitious, with survivors displaying a range of different emotions that someone would reasonably go through in a zombie outbreak. But Capcom didn't have the time to properly implement these ideas, and so they stripped it down to what we got. Thankfully, the AI companions in cases are actually really good at taking care of themselves and only get in trouble if you just completely ignore them, so they're actually fun to tag along with. There are ways to help out with the survivors though, as the game has mixed drinks. Mixed drinks require you to put two different kinds of food together in a blender to create a drink with buffs. Untouchable makes it impossible for Frank to be grabbed, though he can still take damage. Quickstep makes Frank super fast. Spitfire makes Frank's spit lethal. Zombate makes zombies all but ignore survivors and target you instead. Energizer makes you invincible for a few seconds. And Nectar causes zombie queens to be attracted to you, and destroying them kills any nearby zombies. These are useful for psychopaths, as you can stack multiple together. For example, you can be super fast and invincible at the same time, but they're also useful for escorting survivors. You could have Untouchable and Zombate active at once, meaning that zombies can't interrupt the waypoint of survivors, and they basically ignore them. However, they aren't overpowered since they are on a timer and you need to find the correct foods to mix and create them, but they're still useful if you need it. Quickstep with the chainsaw just looks funny. A complaint I do have though is that there are a bunch of ways to trivialize the game. A very well-known way is the small chainsaw with 3 books. Adam is one of the earliest psychopaths you can find, and beating him gives you the small chainsaw. It does a lot of damage even at a low level, killing any zombie in one hit, and most psychopaths will die in a few. It lasts 80 hits by itself, which isn't too bad, but you can stack 3 books on it, which takes it from 80 hits to 240 to 720 to finally, with the 3rd book, 2,160 hits before breaking. And it respawns. And you can carry more than one in your inventory at once. Is this intentional, or did nobody test this prior to release? The fact that you can obtain this weapon in all of the books roughly 45 to 50 minutes into the game is crazy, and from that point onwards, most psychopaths and zombie hordes are very easy to deal with, and if the chainsaw ever breaks, just go grab another one. Not everyone is going to know about this method on the first playthrough right away, but it's still insane that this is a thing. It almost single-handedly breaks the balance of the game, as it has an advantage over every weapon in the game besides firearms. I honestly don't know if they should have allowed 3 books to be stacked on this. It's funny, but it also does kind of break the game. Apart from that, however, Dead Rising's sandbox of funny and interesting weapons, level of interactivity in the mall, and rewards for experimentation makes it an endlessly fun and replayable game that is really hard to get sick of. Psychopaths work in a way that most video game bosses don't. They aren't really designed to be a challenge in of themselves, they're more meant to steal time from the player in various ways, which is the most precious resource in the game. They back off frequently, their attacks can throw you back, they can stun you, and of course this all deals damage that you need to account for, but most of all it means you spend more time fighting them, and the clock doesn't stop during boss fights, it's still ticking down. Despite that, quite a few of these bosses are actually pretty fun. Adam is one of the earliest, and he has a variety of moves with chainsaws. He can breathe fire and throw knives at you, as well as being pretty mobile. He can also block attacks, something not very common in the game. Adam may just seem like a generic crazy clown, but it's revealed that Adam went insane after watching people on the ride devoured by zombies.
Stay away from there, Gramps! Huh? Everyone used to laugh at me. I was a walking punchline. But not anymore.
To which the game then cuts to a shot of toys of children covered in blood, implying that he watched kids get ripped apart by zombies. So while still a variation on the crazy clown trope, there is a bit more to it than that. Cliff is encountered in a hardware store holding survivors hostage whilst wielding a machete and shouting military dialogue.
Name and rank, soldier! You can't tell me, can you, fella? Oh yeah, I know why. It's because you're Viet Cong. I'm right, aren't I? You are nothing but a filthy communist!
He runs around and weaves in and out of the different shelves. He will also jump on top of them and throw pipe bombs at you, or run away using floor grades. After beating him, it's revealed that his family was killed by zombies, and his PTSD from the Vietnam War kicked in, resulting in his mind being transported back to that time.
My granddaughter... She was done in by those damn zombies. When I heard her scream, I just lost it. Everything went white.
And he kidnapped survivors due to him believing they were Viet Cong. Though in his final moments he has clarity and gives Frank the key to help the survivors escape. Joe is a cop at Willamette who sexually abuses younger women out of jealousy. The outbreak gave her the perfect opportunity to carry out her degenerate acts as nobody would be paying attention to her.
Please, help me!
Let's see just how shameless you are, you dirty little skank! Say hello to my little friend!
No, not again! Help me!
Officer. Officer, can I talk to you for a minute? I mean, look, what did that woman do? This seems a little, extreme.
Shut your pie hole!
But Frank, of course, comes in to stop her. Her boss mechanics don't have much to her. She can kill the survivors if you take too long, but otherwise she's pretty easy to deal with. The whole family is a sniper battle in which you either keep your distance and snipe them from afar, or go right in for the kill. They aren't killing for sport or anything like that, they're just trying to erase any possible threats to survive. Even the youngest son, Thomas, brings up the fact that he doesn't want to kill Frank, but his father forces him to, and so it's life or death.
But Daddy, he ain't no zombie. He's just a man.
Thomas! We're doing this to survive. You know that.
Using a firearm for self-defense is our God-given right as Americans, Thomas.
Come on, Thomas, shoot. Shoot him.
Shoot him, Thomas!
Said shoot him. Thomas. Now! What are you waiting for? Do it!
Sean is the leader of the True Eye cult, which seeks to sacrifice others, or heretics, to spare them from being reanimated. You can find cultists throughout the mall and even be kidnapped by them. Sean's fight is mostly him doing various sword moves, which is pretty funny considering he's in his 60s and is able to do crazy stuff. But it makes for a fun fight.
A non-believer in our midst. If we are to achieve salvation, his blood must flow! He must be purged! Spill his blood! The blood of the heretic!
Paul is a teenager with self-esteem issues who tried to burn some women alive because they made fun of him. He runs around and throws pipe bombs to kill you. Quick step definitely comes in handy here. After beating him, he sets his crotch on fire by accident, and you can actually save him and bring him back to the safe room, where he promises to never do arson again. He even gives you an unlimited supply of Molotovs. Steven is a store manager gone mad, as he believes anyone who enters the store is shoplifting or vandalizing the store.
Listen to me, and listen good, partner. I don't allow vandalism in my store!
He runs up and down the aisles with a shopping cart, with weapons attached, and if you try to climb to safety, he pulls out a shotgun and shoots you. Larry is a crazy butcher and implied cannibalist, and he refuses to use zombie meat, as it's spoiled meat.
Zombies are no good. I can't serve my customers spoiled meat like that. I have a reputation to uphold.
Frank then enters a fight with him where he throws knives at you, shoves you on a hook, and throws giant meat at you. Cletus is a gun store owner who is afraid of people stealing his guns and kills a random guy who entered. Frank fights him, and this is one of the worst boss fights ever. You need to stay behind cover, but sometimes his shots will still hit you, and meleeing him is difficult unless he's at the right angle. It sucks. Cletus tries to run away from Frank and ends up being eaten. One of the more memorable psychos is Kent. When you first meet Kent, he's a rival photographer who's trying to capture photos of the incident. He gives you some tips on how to use your camera, and gives you a challenge to take a photo with the highest erotica points. After doing so, he then becomes jealous and ends up capturing a survivor to take a photo of the moment they turn into a zombie. Frank stops this and defeats Kent. The funny thing is that there's actually a bunch of different ways this can go. If the photo you give Kent doesn't have high enough erotica points, he just dismisses you and the case is closed. And if you don't make it to him fast enough on his third scoop, then the survivor's already dead and he uses you as bait instead to get photos. Overall, the Psychopaths are all memorable thanks to their moveset, personality, arenas, and variety of different responses to a zombie outbreak. It's one of the most iconic aspects of Dead Rising. Zombies are an obstacle, yes, but they're easy to kill. The real difficulty is dealing with the people affected by the zombies. And it adds to the difficulty of time. Most of the Psychopaths are holding hostages or useful items, which you'll need to deal with if you want more PP or more resources to deal with more difficult encounters in the game. But you may end up missing a case or another survivor depending on how you manage your time. Dead Rising's tone is funny because the game can go from being comical to taking itself seriously at the flip of a switch, but it doesn't feel disjointed at all. And I believe the reason it works is because it keeps both styles at a distance. Story-wise, the game mostly takes itself seriously. The game is obviously pretty campy and there are some moments of a comedic nature, but overall the main story of Dead Rising isn't really played for laughs. The characters genuinely are stuck in this situation and trying to get out. The comedy mostly comes from factors outside the main story, such as optional psychopaths, survivors, and certain actions the player can do in the environment. As mentioned, you can do a lot of funny stuff in the game, and despite being a threat, the zombies are slow and stupid, so they're not scary. And the game plays relaxing mall music during these moments, which is pretty funny, as the mall is kind of operating as normal, just with the dead now. One of my favorite details is the mall announcements that still play on the intercom, and the fact that the electricity, aside from the safe room, cuts out at night.
Attention shoppers, although we appreciate your continued patronage, we are sorry to announce that the mall will be closing shortly. Thank you for choosing to visit us here at the Willamette Parkview Mall, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yeah.
Come on! Come on!
Okay. Follow me!
Okay.
Follow me! Follow me!
Come on!
It really does make it feel like this was an actual mall that functioned as such. Some survivors in the safe room even ask for requests like wine to help deal with the situation, or they come out to thank you for saving them, or they go to sleep during the later hours of the day. There's even survivors like Cheryl, who, in the middle of this outbreak, ask you to come all the way to the safe room to take glamorous photos of her, giving you huge erotica points. Even when you've saved survivors, they still ask for favors, and some even threaten mutiny if you don't help them, as they don't trust you. It does make them feel like more than just NPCs to escort. They do have personality. You can also dress Frank in whatever stupid outfit you want, and it carries over into cutscenes, which can make some of them very funny to watch. Basically, Dead Rising is as comical as you want it to be. If you want to take the game somewhat seriously, then you can, but if you want to goof around doing silly stuff, then you're at your own disposal. If we're talking soundtrack, then probably the most iconic piece of music is Frank West's theme, which has the atmosphere of a news broadcast, mixed in with a guitar to show the severity of the situation. The whole journalist angle really does shine through the game. The menus and UI are designed to look like a news report. Even when you level up, it's presented as such. It's something I miss about older games. Games now tend to have very homogenized UI and design, and whilst they're functional and readable, yes, it does take away from personality and character. Most of the music is either ominous, sad, or action-packed to fit the scenes they play in, but of course, the Psychopath themes. Some of them are original tracks created for the game, but they mostly consist of licensed music from small bands such as Lockjaw, Supernova Syndicate, The Evolutionaries, or even Shooty HG, which many fans of Devil May Cry 3 and 4 will know. Most are nu metal-inspired songs with a heavy focus on electronical instruments added in, and it really does make the game feel like it's from 2006 in the best way possible. Probably the most iconic is Gone Guru from Lifeseeker, which plays when fighting the convicts. I love this song, but I swear I have PTSD from so many failed runs when I was younger, trying to get the survivors back to the safe room, only to hear this as soon as I went into the park. I would like to play the songs to demonstrate separately without game audio, but I'll likely get a copyright claim if I do, so I apologize. Dead Rising is a campy game that varies greatly in tone, but it never feels out of place when the game goes for a more somber attitude. The game very much establishes it with the opening that many people miss as it only plays if you wait on the main menu for 2 minutes. It shows a mother and daughter being attacked by zombies and cutting away moments before they're ripped to shreds. The danger is made very clear from the start. Frank may be willing to jump headfirst into it, but that doesn't mean it isn't dangerous. It's still very unique compared to most zombie games that either take themselves super seriously or go fully over the top. Dead Rising lands somewhere in between, and it's more memorable as a result. As mentioned, Dead Rising encourages replay value with its structure, but there are also many different rewards you get for completing certain achievements. A lot of clothing items and some weapons can be obtained for doing certain tasks, such as the Saint achievement for getting over 50 survivors out of the mall, killing 53,594 zombies, or by completing the Infinity mode. You can even get the Mega Man Blaster, which is the best firearm. Both the director, Yoshinori Kawano, and producer, Keiji Inafune, worked on many Mega Man games, so the callbacks to that franchise are pretty cool. Infinity mode is a mode where you try to survive for as long as possible without dying. The catch is that your life slowly depletes the entire time. It takes about 20 minutes to go from full health to none. Problem is that food doesn't respawn in this mode. The only way to get more is to fight survivors or psychopaths, which drop them. There's two very infamous achievements with this mode: 5-Day Survivor and 7-Day Survivor. Since 1 day is 2 hours in real time, to get 5-Day Survivor requires you to play this mode for 10 hours straight. You do get the laser sword for doing it though, which is the best melee weapon in the game. 7-Day Survivor requires you to play this mode for 14 hours straight. And just so you know, you can't save. If you die, you have to restart. But who would be crazy enough to do that? Oh wait. I did. For beating 7-Day Survivor, you get Arthur's boxes from Ghost and Goblins. It's really funny looking back at early Xbox 360 achievements because there really wasn't a standard set for what was okay as an achievement. So you get crazy ones like Fear, where you need to play 1,000 multiplayer games, or Quake 4, where you need to rank #1 in the world on the leaderboards. And Dead Rising is another example. To be honest though, 7-Day Survivor isn't actually that hard in terms of difficulty, it just takes a while and patience. There's times where you can be stocked up on enough food to last for 80 minutes or more before needing to go out and get more items. So I would just watch a movie in the meantime and set a timer to remind me to press X on my controller every 19.5 minutes. But still, I'm glad I can join the club of having absolutely no life whatsoever. Dead Rising wears its influence on its sleeve. In fact, it's so apparent that copies of the game had to put this sticker notifying the buyer that the game is not an officially licensed Dawn of the Dead title. In 2008, there was even a court case that Capcom won over the legality of the game. As such, the tone of the game is very apparent with its campy attitude and characters. Frank West has become one of Capcom's most iconic characters since 2006, and it's for good reason. He's someone with a surprising amount of emotional depth. He's mostly seen and characterized by others as a snobby journalist just trying to get a big shot story, but that's mostly a front he uses to get information out of people by bargaining with them. An example being early on, when Brad and Jesse are unable to contact the outside.
There's a helicopter coming. 3 days from now. At noon, it's my ride.
Is your ride reliable?
Absolutely. That's how I plan on getting out of here.
All right then. I'll see to it that the DHS picks up the charter fee. Can we take Dr. Barnaby as well?
Sure. As long as you tell me what's going on.
Okay. I'll tell you what you want to know. Later. We have more pressing business right now.
However, when the situation calls for it, he is willing to help others and put his life on the line, often diving headfirst into danger to do so. The iconic line,
"I've covered wars, you know,"
gives insight into who he is. Given that the game takes place in 2006, this likely means that he covered the Gulf War, the Somali Civil War, the Bosnian War, and the War on Terror. He's not someone who fears dying, it's a risk he's willing to take. After all, he's been covering stories and situations where he was at risk of being shot, blown up, captured and tortured, you name it. And given this line,
"Yeah, well, I'm freelance, pal. I don't make my living waiting for the TV to tell me what to cover."
it shows he cares more about covering stories nobody else will and getting the truth out, which is why he stays in the mall. If he just wanted to grab some photos to publish a story about a zombie-infested mall, he would have all the material he needs in the first 5 minutes of the game, during the helicopter ride. Actually, he wouldn't have even needed to enter the mall with all the photos he would have got. But Frank wants the truth behind the incident. Even when encountering psychopaths, it's made clear that he doesn't want to fight them. He tries reasoning with them, and he's rarely ever responsible for their deaths.
You came to vandalize my store, huh? Not on my watch!
Someone's been hurt. I need medicine.
Hurt!
That guy over there. I mean, that meat.
Oh, this is good meat, huh?
Let me go!
Hey!
Please!
Hey, wait!
No! No!
Pretty much all of the psychopaths die due to their own machinations, and Frank is often seen showing remorse to these people. He does want to help them, but in a life or death situation, he will put up a fight. Frank is still kind of a jerk at times, and is somewhat of a pervert, which is also a mechanic, but he does have the capacity for being a hero. This also adds a variety of ways the player can play the game. If you just want to play as an exploitive journalist using the situation to get material for a story, then you can. The game even lets you do things like kill survivors and take photos of their corpses for material. Or if you just want to use the situation to live out your zombie-killing fantasies, then that's allowed too. Of course, canonically Frank does all of the cases, saves all survivors, and gets the true ending. But the freedom of being allowed to play how you want, and designing a character whose goals and motivations can match whatever the player wants, makes Frank stand out against many zombie game protagonists, and TJ Rotolo brings an authenticity to his performance, managing to capture his serious moments, his panic, his standoffish personality, and his sarcasm very effectively. Even his body language, something TJ did mocap for, tells you a lot about how Frank carries himself. Many of the other characters work with Frank but aren't buddy-buddy with him. Brad and Jesse from the beginning are very hush-hush and don't tell Frank much. They're clearly here on a mission and know more about the situation than him, but it isn't until he bargains with them that they spill the beans.
You guys are looking for someone here, aren't you?
Who is that? Where did you take it?
You help me, I help you.
Damn. You're one hell of a journalist, aren't you, Frank? A hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi with nothing better to do than to invade people's privacy.
I try. You got a point?
Brad is frustrated as he is of higher authority than Frank, but he's stuck in the same situation and he's unable to contact anyone from the outside, so his status doesn't really have much value here, and neither does Jesse's. Despite that, they do work together to uncover the truth and put a stop to the situation. He's always trying to take whatever opportunity he can to achieve his mission. The second he gets a lead, he springs into action. Although, Brad unfortunately dies due to being stuck in a horde of zombies with no ammo. Whilst him and Frank don't like each other, Frank does listen to his dying request to not tell Jesse of his zombification.
Frank. Don't tell Jesse about this.
It's clear that Brad and Jesse have a strong bond, as she's his rookie partner, and she was willing to go and help Brad even with a sprained ankle before Frank took over. Jesse, being a rookie, doesn't really have a full grasp on her emotions. She comes off as very stoic and in control during her first interaction with Frank.
I took that one near the entrance. That guy do something?
Nope. Thanks for showing me, though.
Hey, we're not done talking yet. Just who are you guys?
I'm Jesse. The man you saw earlier is Brad. That's all I'm authorized to tell you.
But that mask falls immediately when she sees Brad get hurt, something she doesn't display towards others who get injured, and she refuses to leave his side until he gets better. It's clear she looks up to him as a mentor. The more time she spends with Frank, the more her cold demeanor drops, and she even jokes around with him.
Must be from that girl I saved.
Girl? Was she hurt?
I offered to help her, but she took off.
Can't really blame her for running from a guy with your looks.
But she still tries to do her job somewhat correctly and doesn't let Frank in on classified information. Though even that changes later in the game when she sees Frank as an asset and communicates with him more frequently. She even calls him with pure excitement when she manages to get a line through to HQ, only to turn to distress when she realizes the plan the Special Forces are going to execute.
Frank, it's over. HQ's decided to ignore us.
What? What do you mean, ignore us?
I contacted headquarters, but the government has decided to deny all knowledge of what happened here. Special Forces will arrive for cleanup at midnight. They'll take everyone out. Zombies, people, everyone.
With nothing left to do but wait and die, she curls up in a ball and cries into her arms. I often get the impression that this was a job Jesse didn't have the experience for. Brad had been in this field of work for a while and was desensitized to it. Jesse was young and clearly did not have the emotional fortitude to handle it. There appears to be a bit of hope when the Special Forces cut a deal to let her live if she doesn't speak of the incident, but she's clearly become apathetic to the situation. It's then revealed that she was infected when attacked earlier in the game, and she reanimates. Brad and Jesse work very well as companions because despite being assets, Frank is still in conflict with them over information. It adds a layer of distrust when you're playing, and even a layer of suspicion as to what they're hiding and if they're the real bad guys here. And there's many up and down emotions they go through over the course of the game, giving a pretty good sense of their personality. Both TJ Storm and Laura Napoli do a good job at showing characters who have more experience and resources than Frank deal with the situation, but are ultimately still human. They still make mistakes and die the same as anyone else in this situation can. You can save them in either ending B or E, but they're not canon. Carlito is the main antagonist. He's the first character in the game Frank interacts with when entering the mall, and he seems very calm despite the situation downstairs.
If it were just a riot, I doubt the military would quarantine the entire area. The moratorium on information getting out is a little extreme, in my opinion. There's, something else I can't put my finger on. Doesn't sound like civil disobedience. It's too quiet.
Almost as if everyone's already dead.
Yeah.
The next time you see him is when you go to help Brad, who is fighting him off, though he escapes before you can get answers. But considering his dialogue when you first met him, he clearly knows more about the situation. Another run-in with Carlito has him hold Dr. Barnaby hostage. They save him, but Carlito leaves Brad injured. Frank goes to look for medicine and runs into a woman with a resemblance to Carlito.
Can you stand? Look, I saw you at the entrance, yesterday. You needed medicine too. Maybe we should work together.
I don't need any help. You people don't know a thing. You're the ones who caused this nightmare. You ruined Santa Cabeza and started all this.
When Frank brings his findings to Dr. Barnaby back at the safe house, he blames the drug trade for the incident, implying that the zombies exist because of it and that these are the actions of terrorists. But that doesn't line up with what the woman said. Frank later runs into her and she tries to kill him. He defeats her and manages to reason with her though. Her name is Isabella, and according to her, the zombies were not created by her or Carlito, and that this whole incident was to expose to the world what the American government did. She also reveals that she's his younger sister and knows where he is, but he's injured and can't talk, though she agrees to bring him to Frank. It doesn't work out as Carlito shoots her in frustration and Frank takes her to the safe room for help, which contrasts Carlito's earlier demeanor as someone who is calm, collected, and calculated. Isabella reveals that the drug trade story was a cover-up for an experiment facility in Santa Cabeza, which was producing zombies. When the experiments failed, they destroyed the village and killed anyone who knew about the incident, with Carlito and Isabella being the only survivors. And they brought Dr. Barnaby here to expose what was going on. Dr. Barnaby attacks Jesse as he's going through the early stages of reanimation, but in his dying moments, he reveals that the experiments weren't meant to create zombies.
So the government's now in the zombie-making business. The whole story about the drug trade was a cover-up?
What do you know? We were trying to mass-produce cattle. Do you have any idea how much meat Americans consume in a single day? That research was absolutely necessary!
He then dies, though this attack did infect Jessie, leading to her death later. Carlito, now trapped in a corner, has one last plan to blow up the mall and send the parasites into the air, infecting all of the United States. Frank and Brad stop him, but Carlito manages to get Brad killed. With all of Carlito's plans stopped, Isabella has one last plan to destroy the transmitter, preventing signals being sent out from the mall, and find more information on Carlito's laptop. Carlito is then spotted on a camera being dragged into a slaughterhouse by Larry the Butcher. Frank manages to reach him, but Carlito bleeds out, still hating America.
Hey. Aren't zombies great? I mean, all they do is eat, and eat, and eat, growing in number. Just like you, good, Red, white, and blue Americans.
Carlito and Isabella are pretty compelling. Despite causing the outbreak and thousands of deaths in this game, as well as the sequels by circumstance, it's easy to empathize with his situation. You hate him and want to see his plans fail, but you understand what drove him to this decision. Even Frank realizes how messed up the Santa Cabeza situation is, and that the world deserves to know the truth. Carlito has the poisonous mentality that because he suffered, more should suffer the same fate, even though the people affected in this situation had nothing to do with his suffering, at least not directly. And having Isabella go through redemption makes it that much easier to understand the pain both she and her brother went through. She had the same hatred and wanted revenge, but after seeing that it resulted in even more deaths, she came to the realization that this causes an endless cycle of violence. When she switches sides, she realizes that Carlito is now becoming the enemy they once faced and wants to put a stop to all of this, and agrees with Frank that the best option is to expose the US government and tell the truth, to which he has evidence now. And Carlito dies in an ironic way, in a slaughterhouse, being the reason these experiments happened to begin with. At first he's portrayed as a mastermind, but as the game goes on, you see him lose control, get backed into a corner, and make decisions out of desperation. It makes him more believable as a character because he isn't an untouchable villain. He ends up getting himself killed. He's a victim who isn't interested in peace. That ship sailed for him long ago. But his sister succeeded where he failed. She just wants all the deaths to end. After finishing all the cases, the military comes in to clean up the situation. You can fight them and they give a lot of PP. In fact, in my No Survivors run, I went from level 20 to level 46 just by farming them for PP. The eerie thing about this section of the game is that as you explore more of the mall, the number of zombies decreases as the military advances until they're all dead. It's a strange experience walking around without any zombies in sight. You can speak with Isabella right before the helicopter comes, but she chooses to stay behind as punishment for helping Carlito. Dead Rising's plot isn't very profound or complex. Its messages about capitalism and exploitive journalism are very surface level, but the storytelling and how information is presented to you, with multiple sources of information with varying levels of reliability, and characters displaying a range of believable emotions, makes for a very engaging and entertaining narrative, and one that has a lot of personality. The game ends with Frank getting on the helicopter. What? Well, that didn't go as expected. Credits? Wait, that's how the game ends? Nope. Time for overtime mode. In overtime mode, Isabella comes to save Frank before he's killed. He then passes out and it's revealed that he's infected.
You must have gotten yourself infected somehow. The time between infection and zombification differs greatly from person to person. You're lucky, Frank. You seem to have a very high level of resistance.
So, so what you're saying is that I get to spend longer waiting for the inevitable, is that it? You know, I'm not sure lucky is the word I'd use.
So him and Isabella quickly make up a cure, which involves you running around to get resources. Isabella then discovers Carlito's ultimate endgame. He founded an NGO to help orphans and then infected them and then sent them to every major city in the US, only giving a small agent to delay the parasite. The terrifying part is that there's no way for Frank or Isabella to know if these outbreaks have already started. They've not been in contact with anyone since they got in the mall. Isabella manages to create an anti-zombie spray to keep them off her for the time being, and they find a hole in the clock tower leading to a tunnel that they escape through, only to be found by Brock, the commander. Brock is really boring, to be honest. He barely shows up and has no personality. The setting for the final boss, fighting him on top of a tank with zombies surrounding you, is awesome, and a very climactic way to finish the game, but as the final boss, he's forgettable. The game then ends with Frank screaming on top of the tank. The text afterwards says that Frank and Isabella escaped, and he published his story, forcing the government to declare at least some involvement with the Santa Cabeza incident, but they deny that the outbreak at the mall was anything other than the work of a terrorist. Afterwards, the world just moved on, with the Willamette outbreak becoming a faded memory in the minds of the public. Overtime mode is pretty neat, as it surprises you and tricks you into thinking you've seen everything, whilst also revealing plot details that the main game didn't, and adding more scenes to flesh out Frank and Isabella's chemistry. This trope did get kind of tiring as the series kept reusing it, but as the first entry it keeps the player on their toes, not knowing if Frank and Isabella will make it out. However, it's not the only ending. As said before, Dead Rising has 8 endings, and they exist to help facilitate different playstyles. Though I say 8, but it's more like 6. Ending A leads straight into overtime mode where you get ending S, so it's more like a fake-out ending. And ending Z is just a game over for failing overtime mode where Frank turns into a zombie. Ending B is for if you didn't solve all the cases, but are at the helipad on time. Frank and the rest of the survivors escape, and he manages to grab some headlines, but the truth behind the incident is a mystery, and outbreaks all over the US start. Ending C is for if you solve all of the cases, but don't talk to Isabella at 10 AM. Frank doesn't make it to the helipad, and Ed is devoured by a zombie. Ending D is for if you're in military custody at 12 PM on the 22nd. Frank is taken away and his fate is left ambiguous, though he was likely killed since his photo is darkened in the results screen. Ending E is just ending B, but Frank doesn't make it to the helipad on time. Ending F is for failing to stop Carlito's bombs during Case 7, where the entire mall blows up, killing everyone and all of the US gets infected. Later games would also have multiple endings. Overall, Dead Rising's story is very fun and memorable, with a lot of the Capcom charm that makes their games engaging, and it propelled Frank into becoming a mainstay, having cameos and appearances in other games. Dead Rising is a nearly perfect game, with an addictive gameplay structure and mechanics, engaging characters, and endless replayability. It's why, despite being a game from 2006, it's still a very beloved title. You've probably noticed that I haven't really criticized much of the game, and that's because there's just not much wrong with Dead Rising. The major issues are the survivor AI and some boss fights kind of sucking. Otherwise, some of the other complaints people throw at this game mostly come down to an unwillingness to approach the game on its terms or adapt to it. Later games in the series would improve in some areas and evolve in many other ways, but there really isn't a zombie game as unique and as fresh as Dead Rising 1 was, even all these years later. Despite the game being about death and running out of time, Dead Rising's game design is timeless, and a reminder of what a truly next-gen experience should be. The next generation shouldn't be used just for prettier graphics. The technology should actually contribute to the game design, otherwise games will fail to evolve. Dead Rising is a prime example of how to do it right.